Hello everybody, this is True Demon the Devil Stockbroker, and this is going to be a short tutorial video on a very brief method on how to trade the SPY. This method has been slightly augmented from a gentleman by the name of Mr. J.G. Banks, who you can follow at Mr. J.G. Banks on Twitter. I read his method and his guidelines, and I tried it out for a few days, and I thought that it was pretty cool. So this is just a way of kind of looking over options flow and comparing it to the market sentiment of the SPY in order to kind of predict what kind of moves it might be making, and then creating a trading plan based around that. So I want to absolutely give the utmost credit to Mr. J.G. Banks for creating this method, which has been working phenomenally well for people who've been watching his stuff, being a part of his group. And I thought that I would try something of my own for those who might not have unusual whales, or for those that are trying to kind of get a bead on the market and may not have access to the more expensive tools that are out there. So one of the main things when trading the SPY is you're basically watching the flow of the market. But one thing to keep in mind is that the flow of the market is heavily influenced by the top 10 companies that are a part of each individual ETF or the overall market. So it doesn't matter what index you're trading. If you're trading the SPDR 500, or if you're trading the Dow, or trading a biotech index, or one like the SPY, which is heavily influenced by the tech industry. If you look at the basket of stocks that this ETF contains, then you can kind of figure out what the weighting is. You have to figure out the weight of each individual ticker that has the greatest influence over the price of this particular ETF. So as I said, this was a method created by Mr. Banks, and he posted this on Twitter, so I just figured I'd read it straight from the horse's mouth and kind of show you exactly what his method is. So he uses unusual whales, and so do I, but there's a couple of things that there's probably traders out there that may not have unusual whales or haven't tried it yet, don't know what it's all about, or haven't quite figured out how to use it. And there are some other tools that are out there that you can use in order to figure out this kind of stuff. One of them in particular is the options fan bot that we have in the Hell's Trading Floor Discord, and I can use that and several of the tools to analyze the flow just at a really quick glance and kind of figure out what direction a stock may be heading. So as Mr. Banks describes it, the weighting of the SPY is heavily influenced by the information technology sector, as well as healthcare, consumers, and the financial sector, as well as communication services. The top 5 holdings that have the greatest weight in the portfolio are as follows, with Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Tesla, and Google making up the top 5, and then Google's Class C, Facebook or Meta platforms, Nvidia, Berkshire Hathaway, and JP Morgan Chase Bank. So just in the top 5 or the top 6, you got Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, Tesla, and Google, and those are by themselves like greater than 10%, like almost 20% of the weight of the SPY. So that's quite a lot of weight, so we can mainly just focus on those particular tickers, and you can kind of get a bearing on what exactly is going on with any particular stock. So the method that Mr. Banks uses is he goes and takes a look at the hot chains and the tickers, and he goes and sees what on these tickers is specifically, and he takes a look at what specific tickers are moving the most at any particular point in time. At the time that he took this picture, the ones that had the most call volume was the SPY itself, and then followed by Apple, Facebook, and Nvidia. So those had the most volume on them, and you can actually look at the individual chains to see which ones had the most options interest and volume. So we could do the same thing. We could go and look at all of this stuff, and we could go one by one looking at the top tickers or the hottest chains and then clicking through each of the tickers. But I'm not that kind of guy. I don't like having to look at all of these things separately and loading up a bunch of web pages, so that's just not my way. Instead, I'll be doing something a little bit different. So here we've got the options fan bot, which is just a little bot that we use in Hell's Trading Floor that is free and available for all members to use with no rate limiting. The server pays for all members to have access to this, so everybody can use it. If you're a member here, you're allowed to throw out commands and ask the options fanbot anything you want. In this particular case, we're looking at the flow. We're using the flow command and then looking at the SPY ticker. So here we can see that there's a huge amount of flow on puts and options interest, in particular for the SPY. There's a lot of real-time updates here for the end of the day going into the close of the day, and you just see all of these puts being added to the chain and going into the market for March 18th. So there's a lot of bearishness just all pushing down on the SPY. We can also go a little bit further and we can look at Apple, for example. We can see that there's a lot of put interest going down on Apple for those same dates. So there's a lot of bearishness on Apple. And also take note of the bid and the ask. So if it's an ask side, then the options transaction is for purchasing, and then the bid would be for selling. So just wanted to point that out. And then you can also note the days to expiration over on the side. So very quickly, if we want to get a bead on what the market is doing and what is, quote, bearish or bullish momentum, you can rapidly do that with the options fanbot just by going Apple, Tesla, Microsoft, Google, Interestingly enough, the Class C stock is getting a whole bunch of puts against it, and the Class A stock is getting call flow. That's kind of funny. But we won't read too much into it. We're mainly focused on what options interest is showing for those particular stocks. Now, if we want to go a little bit further, we can actually look at the OI for the SPY and see where the greatest amount of options interest is. So here we've got a ton of OI on just this past expiration that took place here. OI of calls is mostly is around 30%, and the OI of puts is 66%. The volume of calls is 36%. Volume of puts is 63%. And you go on down the line and you see that overwhelmingly the volume for puts is way, way heavier. So there's a lot of bearish sentiment, at least here in the near term, for the SPY going on here. And this is all real-time options data that gets updated throughout the day. So you can actually be reasonably confident that the data that you're getting here is pretty close to what Unusual Whales is also getting. So after you go through all of your tickers and you've kind of like gone and give it a think and you analyze what the momentum looks like, how much OI is against a particular stock, you notice that like the Google Class A shares have a lot of puts. You know, the OI on the puts is much heavier than these calls, even though there's a lot of recent transactions on those calls. It's, you know, it's still mainly the flow is mainly turned towards the bearish side going into the close of the day, and you can see that same sentiment across most of the SPY stocks, particularly for Apple. Right? So if we were to apply that to what we see the SPY doing, so let's take a look at the flow premium and the value, and we see that the put premium is overwhelming on the SPY. So, and this is going all the way up to the most recent trades. So all of the puts that have been bought have greatly outweighed all the calls. Just tons and tons of bearish pressure on each given day. So down here we can, on the y-axis, we can see the rising premium value. Currently, the trades today accumulated more than $500 million in put volume to just a little less than 150 million on the call volume. And that was just the most recent day. You can track this for each day going back in history. So this is a nice little tool for measuring what the sentiment is like over time. If you're just getting started for the day, you can actually go back in time and look at the opening options flow for a particular ticker. So if you're trying to trade the SPY and you want to get a look at the opening flow, you can see millions of dollars went to the puts immediately, and the SPY took a very short-term dive, and that was only for, what was that? This must be in GTM, is it? If you want to see what the whales are betting on, you can check the big flow command. Take a look at what all the big whales are doing, and, well, that kind of speaks for itself, doesn't it? Got a lot of big ask, a little lean bid and below the bid, selling of puts. But just all throughout the day, huge amounts of premium going into puts. Just lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of puts. Particularly this one big bet where we had a strike of 435 for the expiration date of April 1st and 16.54 million on the ask. And then we had this one print for 17.37 million in between. And those printed about 5 minutes apart from each other. So it's very likely that this was the same trader making a very significant buy, and they were accumulating a large amount of puts going into April. So just based on this information alone, we've kind of got a good idea of what it is that we're expecting for the market coming into next week. Just to get a little bit of confirmation, I want to see what kind of flow things like Apple are doing for extremely large orders. Looks like this was these are two separate orders. Okay. So one whale is very bullish and one whale is very bearish, thinking that Apple is going to rip, or maybe they're just trying to accumulate some shares and they think it'll stay above 165 in the near term, but by April is going to drop below 160. So remains to be seen. But in any case, you can do this for each individual ticker on the SPY. Get a note for where you think that each of these stocks are going to be heading, and try breaking it up. Try looking at the SPY in bits and pieces based on the heaviest weight tickers that are a part of it, and you can get a better idea of where the SPY might be going in the near term. And before we conclude this, I just wanted to point out that there is a ton of commands available in Options Fanbot that can give you an amazing amount of data. And I'll just point this out one last time. This is free for all members of Hell's Trading Floor to use. There's no rate limiting for us. We went and comped this for the entire server, so every member gets a cut. If you want to learn how to trade with just Options Fanbot, I promise if you adapt it to your own strategy, and you have a good, solid, profitable strategy that you like to use, having tools like this can greatly ease the stress and the pressure of trying to find this data all in real time, and you can spare yourself a little bit of that mental expense trying to put it all together and figure things out. If you need to go and find out the documentation on all the Options Fanbot commands and find out what works for you, head to https://optionsfanbot.com/documentation. You can search through all the commands by category, and yeah, have fun with it. And just full disclosure, based on this video that we did here on February 18th, I was doing this a little bit this morning, so I saw quite a bit of bearishness all throughout the day, just using unusual whales, but also with Options Fanbot. I decided looks bearish to me, so I opened up a position going into next week for March 18th on SPY puts, and if I can get a nice little 10, 15, 20% scalp on that, that's a good trade for me. So if you can be consistent and you can trade indexes like this or ETFs like this, and just keep going forward with consistent good gains, you can easily make yourself into a successful day trader just playing these very simple strategies just based off of the indexes. And the one thing to really keep in mind when you're doing this sort of stuff is don't fight the trend. You know, when you see things that are going badly in the market, don't try to fight that and try to find the perfect stock that's going to beat the market. Like, don't do that. Why put yourself in that kind of position? Like, you're just going to add stress to your life. Just go with the flow. It doesn't mean that you have to be like a bullish and super happy, optimistic trader all the time. Recognize where the market's going, find out where the sentiment is, and then go with the flow. Always follow the flow, as Unusual Whale says. That's going to conclude this tutorial on options fanbot and trading the SPY. As always, none of this is financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm just an amateur day trader. But perhaps you can adapt this to your own strategy and figure out how to leverage this to your advantage in your own trades. Thanks so much for watching, and have a hell of a time in the markets.